Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.
Good morning, Pastor.
Good morning to the rising star of morning radio.
What? No,
Come
Pastor.
on.
But good morning to you. How are you doing?
You don't want to good morning.
No.
You don't want to accept that, do you?
Moving swiftly along.
No. Pause forward there. Come on, speaking to you as a counselor now, then people need to accept.
You see, Pastor, you see what you just there? Now you make me have to listen to what you're saying because you using this counsel.
Right, because I counsel people through these things all the time. You have to accept who you are and what's on your plate and just move with it. And if you are poised and positioned to make an impact, what you bring to the table matters, and it has a particular character about it in the way you do morning show. And I don't know whether it's because you're female in what is male-dominated enterprise or whatever, but you bring something to the table that is different. And so if people appreciate that and say, hey, good job, why can't you accept that?
Thank you, Pastor.
There you go.
That's good. That's better. Okay, thank you, Pastor.
Okay.
Now, how are you? You're good? You all right?
Well, I was doing really well until I started checking my messages this morning, and people get my number and message me all kind of things, and somebody messaged me something that kind of threw me off. Something about peonage in the and I've had a good education, by the way, here in St. Vincent and in the United States, but for somehow that slipped through, this whole thing about peonage. I never really followed up on that. They didn't teach me that. And black codes in the United States, in the southern United States. So, I mean, I had my morning going really well, and then, I got this message about check out peonage in the United States and check out black codes and, let me know what you think. And I found out what really that's all about. And it kind of threw me off. Really, really threw me off. Apparently, after the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery in the United States, there's a federal kind of proclamation governing all the states. Apparently, individual states were allowed to recover from that in the sense, I mean, you understand what slave meant to productivity, ongoing production, and when you take that workforce away, you have to have labor coming from somewhere. So the brilliant idea, apparently in the southern states, was to come up with a system that would allow, basically get blacks back onto the plantations and doing work. And apparently, again, the 13th Amendment forbid slave labor, except for using the labor of convicts. So, here's what happened. And I actually started research. You know me already. I go look at if somebody said something. I messaged back the person and said, I would have to research this. And immediately I started researching and found out that some of the southern states passed what were called black codes governing the behavior of freedmen, which is the blacks that were freed after the abolition of slavery. And they were very, very restrictive codes, which if you didn't have a job, for example, you were deemed to be a vagrant and therefore you were locked up. Well, duh. So that's basically a license to lock up black men. Seriously. If you didn't have a job, and the vagrancy laws were a major part of the black codes, you were locked up. And also, for example, if you were preaching to congregation, and preaching was very loosely defined, and you didn't have a license issued by the dominant population, which was white, if you didn't have that, the state legislature did not issue you a license to preach, and you started holding services and preaching like you did prior to abolition, but you were doing that now, you could be locked up. And just a whole number of very repressive laws that these state legislatures were allowed to pass, called the Black Codes. I mean, I had never heard about this. I started researching and reading real fast, so that's what I've been doing. Like, boy, so I got into the reading, and the more I read, the more I got upset. And then once you have this group of black men locked up and convicted of violating these black codes, then the system was that as a convict, you had to walk off your labor And so the plantation owners will pay the state to have these convicts, black convicts. Anyway, that's not what I want to talk about this morning, to be honest.
Well, you're educating us on something I'm sure many of us don't know about.
Yeah, it was, pay the state, so the state got money off. So listen to this. If there's a bounty, really, because it's like bounty hunting. If you have a bounty now on black men, and it's lucrative for the state to have more. It's lucrative both for the state and for the plantation owners to have more black men incarcerated. So the incarceration of black men is not really a new thing. It just got me walked up. And for economic reason and for profiteering, black codes were allowed to be passed by the state legislature, which allowed for the willy-nilly incarceration of black men, and for the express purpose of hiring them out to walk off their conviction, to hire them out to plantation, and the money wasn't going into the black men's pocket. Black men were duly obliged to work as convicts, but the plantation owners were paying off the state to do this, and license to hunt black men this is ridiculous. And to have them incarcerated and for practically nothing. You come off abolition of slavery, where your life was controlled and you trying to find employment elsewhere. You are unemployed, and you are a vagrant because you don't have a job, and you are locked up and basically sold out. There's a new form. Slavery just reinvented itself. When I read all of this, I'm like, slavery reinvented itself. And not only that, once these blacks were locked up or were considered to be vagrants, their children under the age of 18, if the female was under 18, I think if the male was under 20, they were subject to also this condition where the state would, quote-unquote, adopt them and hire them out for pay. It was a rebrand. I read it, and my opinion, not the research that I read, but my opinion, this was a rebranding of slavery. And in fact, it got me to think that as system morphed throughout the age, whether it was the late 1800s or 1900s or into the century, all that is happening is that the economic system and the system of servitude is changing its name, changing its cloak, but servitude is still servitude. And the kneeling thing is just ticking me off. May the grace of God help me to get past this today, because it's historical. I know it's gone, but every time I discover something new that happened to my people, because some research that I was looking at the other genetic research that was done related to us, I realized that I have a very, 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 very strong link to Nigeria. These genetic ancestry research things done. So I have a very so had it not been, and I say all the time, had it not been for the actions of slave owners and the slave traders, I would have been born somewhere over in Africa, most likely Nigeria. That's where I would have been today. So every time I read of stuff like this, I am thinking it's just by the luck of the draw that I was not born in U.S. or in Nigeria, but I was born here in St. Vincent. But so it could have been my foreparents in the U.S. who would have gone through this. It's just the luck of the draw that we got shipped here. So I am not really divorced because this is part of my ancestry and this is part of my lineage, and this is what was done to my people. So you can understand it. It bothers me even if it is historical, when you realize what was done and why it was done, that slaves and black people were seen to be property, and in fact, in some accounts, worse off than animals. It just stirs you up, and it's not what I wanted to read. It's not what I intended to read this morning, but somebody sent me something, and I don't buy things without research. And I just don't dismiss something because I'm like, I might learn something new. And I started researching, and it just threw me off. Okay, so the terms are peonage, if anybody wants to do their own research and get their morning upset.
Oh, no.
Peonage and black codes in the southern states. Peonage, Peonage, and black codes in the southern states. Let me drop that right there.
And Pastor, it's mind blowing to think that there's all of these things are still happening in different forms.
That is exactly my conclusion. I am thinking that the repression is being morphed. So black men are wearing suits or in offices, air-conditioned offices, so they're not out in the field anymore. But I just want to ask myself if the plantation system is not still with us. Again, I could be just speaking off the top of my emotion because I'm upset this morning, so let me just chill and move away from this topic. Is that okay?
Of course.
Yeah, but you understand why I'm upset, though?
Completely. I understand, and what I just said is what for me would be even more upsetting. The fact that we are seeing these things still taking place today.
Of course, you consider the black population of the U.S., Daniel, what percentage it is, and then you consider the prison population. What you consider the bail system. HBO did an excellent documentary on bail and why whites are not that much in prison compared to the black percentage population, proportion of the population in prison. And the bail system, the structure of the bail system is such that it is favorable more so to Caucasians than to the blacks. And what a bail does to you, it basically impoverishes your generation or your people, because the bail bondsmen, just do the research. I mean, I don't want to take up the time talking about that this morning, but it is one of these kind of shark kind of loans where you get the money. It's almost like the mafia. You get the money, but they own you. You'll never be able to pay. It is like a very, very aggressive credit card where you basically, if you take out a credit card with 20% API or something like that, you will be paying installments for the rest of your life. It's just, I think more and more about the system. The system is very repressive. When we talk about systemic racism, the system seems to be very, very repressive. And when you investigate it, because on the surface it seems like, the blacks are doing well and all of that. But when I listen, as I have been listening to research, and I listen to what's happening in health, I listen to what's happening in housing and other sectors, I listen to what's happening in prison, imprisonment, incarceration and I do the comparative analysis, or the comparative analysis is done for me by reputable people, and I read through the comparative analysis. I realize this is ridiculous. I mean, it is very clear to me. I mean, even a blind man can see, boy, a black man in the United States ain't have it easy. Just facts. Just facts.
Absolute facts.
But that's not what I wanted to talk about.
I was just
morning.
going to say, well, we strapped for time.
Well, we could talk about tomorrow then, okay?
But Pastor, you don't want to at least touch on what you wanted to?
Well, yeah, because yesterday. Oh, by the way, I want to thank the people who listened to my commentary yesterday and let me know that it was helpful to them. I really appreciate that.
It really was.
Yeah. We talked about the macro structure, and I said yesterday that St. Vincent was probably one of the safest places on earth. If you look at it from a macro structure point of view, one of the safest places on earth for children, because of all that we had in place, legal structure, social structure, organizational structure, it was really polished and looking good. But I also said that when you examine the micro reality, it was different from the macro structure. One of the things I also said yesterday is that the law, we have a great law, the Children Care and Protection Act of 2010, modifications here and there to govern, abuses of all kinds related to children and the adoption of children and the removal of children from their homes. And it's really a good, I'd be honest, Daniel, those who are responsible for putting this in place, it is a really good act compared to what I read in the Trinidad, the similar act in Trinidad, and also the similar act in Jamaica. I think Jamaica's is called Children Care and Protection Act or something like that. But compared to what I read there are some stiffer penalties, I think, outlined in the Jamaica Act, for example. But even so, I find that the St. Vincent Act is a really, really good act. So let me commend the fact that we have this act here in St. Vincent. But let me also decry the fact that people don't know about it. Daniel, I'm not sure if you were aware of all of it and the ramifications and other people. So yesterday when people commented, and let me know that at least they appreciate the fact that I'm raising their awareness as to what this act is, so that, they can go out and check it out. Again, let me say that this is an act. I don't know what percentage of our population is children, but I suspect that that demographic is going to be high. And also that some of them are in abusive situation given certain sociological understandings of depressed communities. I expect that some of our children, whether they're financial deprivation or emotional abuse, or even some we know, I'm not going to say that it's predominantly physical abuse, but there's some physical abuse, and we hear from time to time, in fact, as far as I'm concerned, too frequently we hear of sexual abuse of children. So we know that this is a reality here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we need to know what the recourse is, seeing that we have incidences of this nature related to our children. I think all and sundry would need to know some of what the Act provides for. So again, I started doing that yesterday, and in the 6 minutes or 5 minutes that I can, let me just point to one thing in this act, and then I would let me point to two things very quickly. I won't even use 6 minutes, because he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. So I'll come back another day and fight up. But the administration of the act, again, no act is worth anything unless it is properly administered and enforced. This is a very good act, and I think the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines needs to know that the administration of this act lies in the lap of the minister. And currently, given our current ministerial structure, it is now under the portfolio of the Minister of Mobilization, etc., etc., etc. And so what the act says with respect to the administration, because people need to know on whom the buck stops with the minister. The ball is in his court. Matters related to the abuse of children, the protection of children, and the adoption of children in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The Act says the minister shall promote the development of procedures and protocols. So the buck stops with the minister, okay? And utilizing government with government, non-governmental agencies, families, corporations, business agencies, and the community to promote the care and suitable adoption of children. So the minister, again, I know you may want to call the police, you may say, I want to call Marion House, you ask who to call. The nation needs to know that this is under the portfolio of the minister. Secondly, in relation to that within that ministry, there's the establishment within the ministry responsible for social services. Listen to this, the Office of the Directorate of Family Services. So that is what the Act provides for, that the minister or within that ministry, as part of one of the branches, organizational structure, there should be a director of family services. And the role of the director is to promote and safeguard the safety, the welfare and well-being of a child. I'm just reading all of this, okay? This is what's in the Act, that we have this structure. People need to know who shall we go to, who shall we hold responsible, who shall we cry to. And the role there within the Directorate of the Family Services is to assess and investigate or to cause an assessment to be undertaken. Once a report is coming in, you have to assess, you have to investigate, and then you have to do follow-up. Like I said yesterday, but I won't get into details, if the follow-up is given, you might decide there's a fake report, or you might decide action needs to be taken, in which case you need to deploy, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, time permitting, unless something comes up. I will explain how the follow-through should be done to ensure the care and protection of a child in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Ultimately, what can potentially happen is that, given the assessment, the Directorate has actually the legal authority to immediately search the home and remove the child from the home and any other child or children in that home immediately, even before going to court, as I read and understand it. You have to do an immediate removal, and then pursuant to that, you go through the court to see, and pursuant to the analysis, assessment, the investigation, casework, you decide if there is sufficient ground to go to the court with documentation for removal of the child from that home and be placed in what we call child care services. Yesterday I said that those child care services would be like a boarding home, group home, foster home, residential care, etc., etc. So what I am saying, Daniel, is that we actually have a really good structure to care for our children in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We really have a good structure. What the issue is one, people are not aware. It is no point having the best cheesecake in the world, because I heard you talking about cheesecake with Flex. It's not point having the best cheesecake in the world if you don't open the box and start eating on the thing and enjoying it. So we have a good structure, but people are so unaware of the mechanisms as to how it works. And I think that if people become aware as to the mechanisms of how it's going to work, or what are the hiccups, etc., etc., it will give us a better grasp as to how we can pursue the care of our children here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Once more, Daniel, I want to thank you for bringing this very, very important topic on the table and giving the opportunity for me to just highlight certain things to our listening audience that I hope will be helpful. But again, the Act is the Children Care and Adoption Act, and it makes great provisions for the care of our children here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Children Care and Adoption Act?
Yes, of 2010. Children Care and Adoption Act of 2010. That's what I have. Okay?
Thank you, Father. Pastor, I said Father.
That's cool. I get that. You have a Catholic education.
Yes,
My daughter also went to Catholic school,
yes.
and she also calls me Father, but for a different reason. She only calls me
Yes.
Father when she's upset at me. Other than that, it's Daddy. I love it. Listen, you all have a great day, okay?
All right, you too, Pastor. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right.
Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.